Voltron, love, and order in the church. Today, on another episode of the Bible in 1 year with the preacher's husband. Today, we are going through 1 Corinthians chapter 12 through 14. Tomorrow, we're going to go through 1 Corinthians chapter 15 and 16. So let's dive in and see what we got in store today. So right off the bat, Voltron in the Bible, right? That's right, just as a body, the one has many parts, but all its many parts form one body, so it is with Christ. I see that verse and I can't help but think of Voltron, because there were these 5 lions and they would come together and they would form this one big body, this one big huge robot to fight against the bad guys. And I just find it just to be fascinating. So here we are really talking about diversity of spiritual gifts. Now, every one of them little lions in the Voltron cartoon, they had their own gift, and they all had their own person that the lion selected to be its pilot, and they all had different attributes. Some were big and strong, some were fast, some were whatever. They had multiple different gifts that they were given, right? So here we are. And the Spirit, according to his will, distributes a diversity of gifts to the body for its common benefit. This is basically all of verses 4 through 7 here. Actually, 4 through 6. It says in verse 4 that there are different gifts. And throughout here it says there are different ministries and there are different activities. But the same God produces each gift in each person, right? One is given a message of wisdom, another knowledge, another faith, another is a gift of healing, another performing miracles, to another prophecy, to another distinguishing between spirits, to another different kinds of tongues, to another interpretation of tongues. One and the same Spirit is active in all of these. So not every person has all the gifts, but instead each person has their own special gift, right? And then basically this brings us to the whole concept of unity, yet diversity in the body, or the body of Christ. The dispersion and diversification of all of these gifts, it's not an accident. This is done on purpose. God himself has given these just as he wanted to give these to us, right? Many parts, but one body. This encapsulates our identity as individuals enfolded into the corporate body of Christ. And then we get to verse 26 here, where it says, so if one member suffers, all the members suffer. If one member is honored, all the members rejoice with it. How cool is that? So basically, we are all in this together. In verse 27, now you are the body of Christ and individual members of it. So here we are. Now we get to chapter 13, and this is known as the love chapter. And this is probably one of the most beautifully written chapters. It's very short. And one of my favorite verses, especially that Paul has written here, is verses 1 through 3. And it says, if I speak human or angelic tongues, but do not have love, I am a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith so that I can move mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. And if I give away all my possessions, and if I give over my body in order to boast, but do not have love, I gain nothing. So even if you do all these good things, if you don't have love, you're pretty much bankrupt. You got nothing, right? So then we get to verses 4 through 8 here. In verses 4 through 8, 4 through 5 specifically, Paul personifies love in order to show its daily character and choices. Love is not self-centered, but is outwardly focused, or is focused on others, right? And many aspects of church life will end at the end of this current age as we get through verses 8 through 10 here, or 8 through 13. But love never ends according to this, right? The permanence signals love's priority within the church. Verse 11 says, when I was a child, I spoke like a child. I thought like a child. I reasoned like a child. When I became a man, I put aside childish things. Now, verse 10, it says, but when the perfect comes, the partial will come to an end. Now, the perfect here refers to the next age or the eternal age when the Messiah reigns. And in verse 11 that I just read as well, Paul uses this analogy of infancy versus adulthood to explain the contrast between our present understanding and the understanding that we will have in the next age to come. We get to verse 13 here, and it says, now these three remain, faith, hope, and love, but the greatest of these is love. Now, of faith, hope, and love here, love is the greatest because it continues into the next age, right? Both faith and hope will be fulfilled in eternity. They'll be there, but they won't remain. So they're fulfilled, but the one that does remain is love. Love is forever. Love is eternal. It'll be there forever. And in chapter 14, bewildered, disoriented, confused, unsure, lost, chaos. I love that verse on the screen. I'm just going to leave it there for you. This is basically talking about prophecy, which is a superior gift. And Paul is specifically talking about this gift is superior over speaking in tongues, so to speak. So here we are. And Paul in verses 1 through 4 here, he basically says that he valued prophecy over uninterpreted tongues for the edification and exhortation of others. The phrase no one understands him refers to the uselessness of uninterpreted tongues for the corporate body. And just as a foreigner is estranged by those who are speaking a language that they don't know, like you go to a foreign country and everybody's speaking in that other language, you don't know it, you're pretty much left out, right? And so too, the members of the body of Christ become estranged from one another if unintelligible and untranslated tongues are spoken in church. So why would you even speak in tongues if nobody can understand it? That's between you and God at that point, not between you and the people. It's basically what he's referring to. So we get to verses 23 through 25. And Paul warned the Corinthians that practicing other tongues carelessly would actually be harmful to outsiders and to unbelievers. Church-wide prophesying, however, would serve to convict and convert visitors to Christ. And then we talk in verses 26 through 35-ish, or actually through the end, through 40, about order in the church meetings. And this is order concerning speaking in tongues and prophesying, right? And basically saying that whenever you come together, each one has a hymn, a teaching, a revelation, another tongue, or an interpretation. In other words, everybody's going to church and they all got something they want to say, something they want to sing, a message they want to tell to people. But everybody can't do it all at once, right? You can't just have everybody, some people over here singing, some people over here prophesying, some people over here speaking in tongues and all these stuff going on all at once. It becomes chaos when that happens. He says everything is to be done for building up, right? If anyone speaks in another tongue, there are to be only two or at the most three, and each doing this in turn, basically one at a time, and let someone interpret. If there's no interpreter, that person is to just keep silent in the church and speak to himself and God only. Now, 2 or 3 prophets should speak, and the others should evaluate. And of course, that's going to be one at a time as they do that. But if something has been revealed to another person sitting there, the first prophet that was talking should be silent while the other person is talking. This is basically just taking turns. Keeping order in the church is what this is all about. For you can all prophesy one by one so that everyone may learn and everyone may be encouraged, right? Everybody don't need to be blurting out all at the same time because that's distracting. It's disruptive. And it says here, God is not a God of disorder. He is a God of peace, not disorder, okay? And as in all churches of the saints, it says, the women should be silent in the churches, for they are not permitted to speak, but are to submit themselves, as the law also says. If they want to learn something, let them ask their own husband at home, since it is disgraceful for a woman to speak in the church. Now, these verses here should not be taken as a prohibition against women speaking in church, because to say otherwise would actually contradict Paul in several other places where he is written. And specifically yesterday when we were talking about church and how the headwear in church, for instance, in chapter 11, verse 5, when Paul basically says when a woman goes to church and they pray and they prophesy, they need to have their head covered. And here's why, and he talks about their customs there. Well, clearly, Paul is saying that women go to church, they pray, they prophesy, they can speak in church, right? But here, basically, when you translate these words from the old language to the new language, we lose a little bit in the translation, and asking them to be silent and not being permitted to speak are actually referring to not causing disruptions. If you take it into the context of this whole chapter here, that's really what this entire chapter is about, is not being disruptive in church. And in Corinth at the time, you had these ladies and gentlemen, some which were converting from matriarchal based pagan religious practices. They would speak and yell out and scream in church and dance around and be distracted, and they were all doing all this stuff all at the same time. And this is specifically what Paul is referring to here, is this was a pagan thing. This is not a Christian thing. This was their culture. Now this is our culture. They're going to have to conform to this culture to be able to come to church and do these things together with us. So that's basically what he's saying. Out with that culture, in with this culture. Everybody needs to not be disruptive in church, all right? So that's what I got for you today. And I hope this has helped you in your learnings and your readings. And if it has, click that like button, subscribe button, and click the little jingle bell so you get notified the next time I upload a video. If you're rumbling with me on Rumble, hit that little boxing glove, and remember, order in the church. We'll see you tomorrow for another episode of the Bible in 1 year with the Preacher's Husband. I'll see you then.